Welcome to the Strategy Skills Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Safarova, and this episode is sponsored by strategytraining.com. And today we have with us a very special guest. It is Cas Holman, the founder and chief designer of the toy company Heroes Will Rise, based in Brooklyn, New York. Cas travels the globe speaking about playful learning, the design process, and the value of play in all aspects of life with teams, and has worked with teams at Google, Nike, Lego, Disney, and art museums around the world. And you may have seen Cas in Netflix documentary series Abstract. Cas, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Nice to be here.
So glad to have you with us. So play is the engine of meaningful original work. We can describe it that way. Yet adults rarely engage in play. It is even something that people look down upon. So many adults desperately need more play in their lives. How can we unlearn how not to play?
Yes, there's actually a movement called unschooling, which I think is a little bit related, right? Where we kind of, rather than trying to learn something new, we try to unlearn how to not do the thing that we inherently know how to do. One of those things is play. And yeah, I think that for adults, it's a little bit harder to access what we already know and what we might inherently trust about letting ourselves play. Because we have, in fact, spent quite a good amount, if not most of our adult lives, suppressing the instinct and the urge to play in the interest of things like productivity and efficiency. And it gets a little bit wound up in what we consider to be successful, what we think we need to be as successful adults. And so, yeah, I've been thinking for some time about how to help adults get back to their playful selves and get back in touch with what we already know about play, which is still inside of all of us, I believe.
Cas, and for a child who doesn't have parents that do not allow them to play or do not give them enough time to play, let's say in the United States, for most adults, when do they naturally stop playing?
School has a big part of that. As children, we all become who we are through play. We, as children and in our adolescence, we play in order to understand the world and in order to understand our place in the world, and our place within our household, our place within our community, the dynamics within our, if we have siblings and other family and other neighbors and people around, we approach understanding ourselves and our role within those communities through play, through both kind of figuring things out, trial and error, testing different ways of being through kind of pretend play. And you can see this if you're around children, and hopefully through an exercise of just kind of remembering, you can get back in touch with and remember what that was like to try to experiment and explore as a child, and kind of start to understand that trial and error is play. And so I think starting with kind of a play memory is a way for adults to kind of reconnect with, like, oh, right, that is something that I remember doing and that I know how to do. And from there, we can kind of start to reconnect with what play might look like for us as adults.
And before our listeners start thinking, hold on, Chris, why are we talking about play? Are you realizing what is happening in the world? Why are we wasting an hour of our time talking about play? I think that let's just talk about why it is very important for us to still pay attention to this topic.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that play is something that happens after we work, or play is something that happens when everything's hunky-dory and wonderful. But in fact, play is also how we cope with things that are really difficult. And in particular, I think how it might relate to your listeners, play is how we manage and kind of find our way through uncertainty. And so in particular, right now, most people in the world are faced with a large amount of uncertainty. In the US, things are changing so rapidly in very unpredictable ways, which are unsettling and unnerving. And I think that people either feel tremendously anxious around that. For a lot of people who are trying to plan their lives, or losing rights, or losing access to services and things that we need and take for granted up until now as kind of a human right. We play is actually a way that we can cope with some of that, and kind of understand that these aren't things that we are gonna maybe have any control over, for better or for worse. And so in not just play as an act of kind of or an activity of enjoying ourselves, but play as a mindset. So being playful in how we think about what we're doing, either in our work or just in our coping strategies. But entering it playfully can mean being open-minded, and much more flexible and agile amongst circumstances and situations that are uncertain. And so being playful when you're going into periods of uncertainty doesn't just mean like making jokes of it. It might mean actually just being more creative and flexible. And so going in and saying like, okay, this isn't what I imagined or planned on happening right now. But with a playful mindset, we can kind of go in and say, okay, this isn't what I expected, but here's what I have. And so how can I be creative with what's here? How can I be creative with like what I can plan for and what I can't plan for, and approach it with an open mind and embrace whatever possibilities there are, rather than getting really stuck and hung up on, wait a minute, it was supposed to look like this, adulthood, or, my planning was meant to look like this and it doesn't. And therefore, like, I'm totally stuck, right? And entering that playfully can really help us kind of manage it and work around what we wind up with.
Very true. And I think also to do outstanding work, you need to be an artist in that moment when you're doing that work. And to be an artist, you need to be able to play. You are in that state that is very different from being a serious adult.
Yeah. And I think that in talking to people about play, talking to adults about play and, what playfulness or even what creativity looks like, it's interesting. I think that a lot of people associate creativity with art making. And will often say like, oh, but I'm not an artist, or I'm not creative. And when I point out or talk to them more about like what they do in their work or what their domestic lives are like, they are quite creative. And I think adults often, like, because we associate it with art and art making, and if we're not an artist, then we're like, oh, well, then I must not be creative. But in fact, the way that people run their businesses, the way that people kind of arrange their time and engage with their friends and family is often quite creative. It's just ways that we don't kind of associate as such. And then play is very similar. So, for example, what our play looks like as adults might look quite different than what we typically think of as play, right? Because we think like, oh, I recognize play in a 5-year-old, or even a 10-year-old. And I don't do those activities, so I must not play. But for example, I have a friend who is an avid bird watcher. And when she describes what's happening for her when she's bird watching, it's the same thing as play. There's flow. She loses track of time. She loses track of, whatever worries and distractions she had before she started bird watching. She gets so engaged and she notices things. She's curious. She kind of follows a trail that she doesn't know where it's going. And all of those are also elements of free play in particular, which is the type of play that I design for. Free play is a little bit different than sports or games in that it's something that's intrinsically motivated, personally directed, and freely chosen. So there's kind of no extrinsic motivation or reason to do it. I'm not doing it because I'm gonna win. I'm not doing it because I'm gonna get a prize or a raise. I'm not getting paid. There's no kind of incentive other than that it feels really good and connects me to something that I need at that point in time. And so there's kind of also, I think, if adults think about one of the things that might keep, and you brought up productivity. One of the things that might keep us from playing is the idea that it's not productive. But in fact, like, you could like eating well and sleeping enough, in the way that we've shifted those to understand that eating well is actually productive and sleeping enough is productive because it, not just because it makes you more capable at work, but it just makes you feel better. And that counts as productive. I think play is similar. We can point to all of the ways that it helps with creativity and innovation. And also, if it makes you feel better, then anything you do is going to, feel better. And so in that way, I think the idea that we have to be productive with our time, or we have to kind of use time rather than just kind of, being in ourselves and following our noses and our curiosity. I think that can also kind of sometimes be a hindrance to accessing what play might look like for us as adults.
And also when we talk about productivity, when you add some rest, you actually are more productive afterwards. So
yeah, of course,
it pays off. You can get a lot more done this way.
Well, yeah, and also I think even as we let ourselves play more and reconnect with how good it feels and how much more kind of in touch we are with our own needs when we play. We can also we notice there's, and research shows this as well, there's less anxiety. We are more flexible when things come up that in our problem solving doesn't just mean at work, right? So little things that come up in planning our lives or going about our day. For example, I've been having some computer issues and I could say okay, this is not working. I'm getting frustrated and kind of everything would then be, I would be moving forward from a place of frustration and, technical glitches, this needs to be working. But I've been all day, I've been kind of rolling with it and seeing what happens. And so I had to do things in different ways that I'm actually quite happy with now. I'm actually, maybe I like this browser better, or this setup, I didn't think I could be this close to that part of the house, where the router is in my office and all the things. But in fact, it's making it interesting and making me more aware of kind of whatever systems I think I need in order to do what I'm doing, by kind of breaking the system every once in a while, right? And in being playful, sometimes play means just kind of changing habits, in order to then kind of be curious about what else is there, and also make me more aware of what it is that I actually need in order to be doing, whatever it is I'm doing, which in this case is kind of work. But for me, my work is also kind of play. This conversation feels playful. And so, I think that thinking about play, not just as an activity or a kind of something that we do outside of work, but an approach, right? That play is an approach, or a playful is a mindset that we bring to everything we do.
How do you think being playful impacts someone's communication and executive presence skills?
Well, I think we can be really playful with our language, for one thing. And I'll often, when I'm in a conversation, I think of conversation as very collaborative. So as someone is talking, as we're speaking right now, you're kind of, because you're playful, or because you're engaged, you are, you're collaborating with me in the understanding of what I'm saying, right? So by shifting words, kind of playing with how something is framed, we get to kind of reframe it and understand it differently, which I also almost liken to kind of break something in order to understand it better, which isn't something that typically adults are comfortable or necessarily intuitively do, because we think it has to be successful, right? We when we know how something works, we do it the right way, and we don't want people to think we don't know. So I think people often are in conversation not very playful because they don't want to appear like they don't know. there's a misconception that adults are supposed to know everything, right? Or if you're smart or if you're successful, you know everything. When in fact, like there's not much to learn there if you know everything. That's not a great way to go in, and it isn't always very curious. And so I often kind of think of it as like failing in order to learn, right? We take something apart in order to understand it. Some of my play is that I have this this property I'm trying to build. My studio is there, but it's kind of it's not on the grid. It has varying degrees of functionality in terms of power and water and things like that. It's in the woods, and so there are a lot of systems in the buildings on the property that I never would have understood if they had worked from the beginning. But because when I bought the property, the buildings were so broken that I've had to understand, plumbing and electrical and wells and pumps and things and solar systems. I understand them more because they haven't been working. And I think that's thankfully, because I'm playful, that's all kind of something I'm rolling with and learning from. And I think that's something that in adulthood, we kind of think that the goal is that everything always works, which of course, often it is. It would be nice if the power just consistently worked for me. However, by entering it with kind of a playful mindset, I'm able to learn so much more. And now I have a better grasp of how this solar panel electrical system works, which is really interesting. And I've been able to kind of adapt it more for what I need, and learn so much from it that I wouldn't have learned it, like I said, if it had worked on the outset. And so there are opportunities to learn when we don't know and when we enter something playfully. So yeah, there's this kind of like, in adulthood, our relationship to success and failure is another thing that will kind of like inhibit us from entering something playfully.
Very true. And you could follow your curiosity with this studio in the woods, which sounds very, very, very exciting. It probably is very inspiring to be able to come out and see the birds and the animals and the trees.
Yeah, I think that the other part of it is that, and I do catch myself getting quite hung up on what's not working. And I have to kind of remind myself that I'm there for, for the nature and the giant moon and we have true dark. There's no ambient light. So I can see all of the stars, not all of the stars. I can see so many more stars than I do in the city. I live in Brooklyn mostly, and my studio is out in the woods. And so, in order to kind of enjoy the process, I am hoping to renovating it and trying to make the place more of a functional building. And in the meantime, I'm checking in with myself to kind of make sure that I'm enjoying the process, which means embracing it where it is. And still having gatherings there and bringing adults. We have kind of an adult summer camp situation that happens a few times during the summer months. And still doing that, even though it doesn't, it looks a little different. It's a little more like camping than I had originally imagined. And at some point I thought, well, okay, it's not ready, so I can't have these parties yet. I can't have these gatherings because the plumbing is still not working, and there's not enough room for people to sleep. And, and I kind of said, well, wait a minute, let me reframe success. So then one of the tenets of adults and play, and free play in particular, is reframing success, right? What does success look like? Does success look like I have this, beautiful, pristine house that people are staying in? Or does success look like we all come together and have bonfires and conversations, and we swim and we connect with each other for a few days? And if those are my goals, we don't need necessarily, spare bedrooms, and, we can do that camping. And so we do. And some people camp, and some people, find other spots to stay nearby, but we still come together. And so in order to do that, I kind of have to continuously reframe success, right? What does success look like? And if success is that we're all together, then we don't need this, building to house us all. We just need a place. And we have that. So, let's craft and let's design everything else around that as the primary goal. And that happens quite a bit. I think that's a larger example. And then in smaller examples, I think, ways that adults are even approaching being with friends. And, say that you get together to play basketball, and you have an hour. Everybody's got to get back to their kids, or got to, go and fix dinner, or get groceries, or, go back to work, whatever we're doing. So we have an hour, and, 5 people show up, and you're like, oh, well, we're playing basketball. So obviously we need 6 people. And like the ball is flat, and the soccer field is open, but the basketball field is taken. So if we're really hung up on like, we came here to play basketball and now we can't do anything, then you're not going to get far, right? But if you come with a playful mindset, then you might say, okay, what are we going to do? What can we play? We all want to play together. What game can we invent with an odd number of people, a flat basketball, and a soccer or a football, net? And then from there, you get to invent something, right? Because the goal probably is not to have a really rigorous 3-on-3 tournament. The goal was to hang out for an hour, move your bodies around, and, laugh and be engaged in some kind of play. And so, so the playful mindset, you kind of reframe, success means that we're all together. So we have that, and we have these other ingredients. Let's just make it up as we go and see what happens.
It reminds me of a mindset I always demand of myself, to have this view on the world that, okay, things are happening for you. How can you leverage this situation in the best possible way? I also remind clients about this. And it makes such a big difference once people start adapting this kind of mindset, because as humans, we miss so many opportunities. Like what you described now, if you all showed up and were upset that the ball is not right and we don't have a place to play, you would have missed out on probably one of the best games you had, because you came up with it and just use your imagination what kind of game you could play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, which also happens when people are like maybe not that maybe you're uncoordinated, or, in basketball as an example, there's a big advantage if you have height. And so there's an assumption that like, if the goal was to be good, then, maybe you're not going to have very much fun because you're with a bunch of people who are tall and more physically able than you are. But in fact, the goal isn't to win or to impress anybody. The goal was to connect with each other and have fun. And you're going to have a lot more fun if you're not hung up on being the best. And so it also kind of allows for the goal is not necessarily winning. Again, like reframing success, the goal isn't winning or being impressive. The goal is to enjoy yourself, in which case the shortest person might be kind of the best, right?
Definitely. And if it feels right, I would love to share with community photos of the sky and of the studio. If you have any, if you will feel comfortable sharing, I think it would be very interesting for people to see. That studio in the forest sounds...
Oh, photos. Yeah. I mean, right now, it's a barn. It's a giant barn. And there are a couple other cottages on the property. One is quite crooked. And so we haven't been able to, we've been trying to save it from, it had some leaks. So we kind of got the leaks on the roof sealed up, but it was kind of crooked and falling down. So we were afraid to do too much work until we got it straightened up. And yeah, so there's a number of different ongoing projects, but it's all built around this beautiful pond. And so, again, kind of the house or the place that we're going to sleep is important, but not as important as the thing that kind of is the focus of being there, which is this beautiful pond and the nature. I'd love to share a picture. And the barn just looks like a big kind of, it's not in terrible condition, but it doesn't. We currently don't have running water, and we periodically have electricity. but I stay there for weeks at a time. We make it work.
And I know what you mean because I went through a house renovation that took a year, was supposed to take 4 months. So I know how hard it is. It is so hard to renovate things. So let's talk about adult free play. You mentioned that it needs to involve embracing possibility, releasing judgment, and reframing success. Maybe we can, I know we spoke about reframing success. Maybe we can spend a little bit more time on embracing possibility and releasing judgment.
Yeah. So embracing possibility is really just to say curiosity, right? That's kind of to say be open to what might come, right? And this in particular for adults sometimes is tricky because, like I said, we have an idea of what something is going to be, right? Or we're a little bit afraid of stepping into the unknown because for a lot of reasons in particular that relate to school, as you brought up, we shift, our learning shifts throughout school. And I like to separate learning from school because I think like many people are avid learners and love learning, but maybe had a hard time in school because school isn't always necessarily designed for learning. School is often designed for like educating at scale, which means that it's meant to work for 30 children in one classroom, and of those children, maybe half of them aren't really being served in their learning style, right? But so I think that in school, the way that we learn is kind of toward a test, right? We learn what's going to be on a test. We learn that there are right and wrong answers largely. And so whatever we're curious outside of what might be tested or what might be directly related to kind of that lesson is kind of shaved off, and we're like taught to really hone in on the specific thing that is accessible and has a clear, correct answer. And so in that, our curiosity, we get a little bit disconnected from our curiosity, right? It's considered very disruptive if you keep asking questions that are unrelated to the lesson. And that's understandable. Teachers have a lot of students and they're trying to stay on track, and they have this kind of very rigorous rubrics that they're meant to stick to within a curriculum. And so unconsciously we learn that to be kind of productive or to be successful, we need to keep going toward this one right answer that is defined and known and understood. But in fact, like there's so much that's happening outside of those right answers that's interesting or fun or compelling or just unknown. And so to be open to and curious about all of the things around the things that we know is, I think, one of the things that can happen in a playful mindset. And so embracing possibility is just to say, it's okay to not know, step into it and see where it goes. And maybe it's nowhere, but that's not always the point, right? And, we can also then point to that innovation and novel ideas come out of the unknown. But I don't think that alone is the reason to do it. That can also be a side effect, but not the primary objective. And then releasing judgment, I think, is critical for adults in play in a way that children, when they're in their younger years in particular, don't have any judgment around play. They're not self-conscious of play, right? They automatically and intrinsically are motivated to play. That's how they do everything. It's how we all do everything as children is we play through it. And then at some point through a lot of the things that happen both in school and in puberty and in kind of growing up, we're taught to suppress those urges and, be more serious or be more on track or, all of the reasons why we need to get to school. You can't start playing right now, or just please put your shoes on. Don't put your shoes on your hands. Put your shoes on your feet. Don't make all the things. So like these little minor corrections that we have just in the process of like existing as children, we're learning to not play. And so, those are become part of who we are. So as adults, when we do feel the urge to play or when we do play, there's a lot of judgment in that. I think it comes from inside of ourselves. We have judgment around our own want or needs to play. And then I think we fear the judgment of others. I think that often, like, for example, I will be conversationally playful while I'm in line at the grocery store. So I'll kind of be chatting with somebody in line and realize that if the person who's checking out the groceries is talking to me, then it's taking a little bit longer, right? And that 30 seconds, I'm often very aware of, because I can tell the people in line behind me might be very aware of, and they're thinking, you are making this take longer. You should not be making the person chat. You're making everything. And I'm thinking, then I have to remind myself, it's 20 seconds, right? This interaction that is making us all feel more human is adding 20 seconds, and that is okay. And so I have to be continuously kind of releasing my own judgment around, don't talk to that person, like, let them do their job, and then I'm also like, no, they can also, as a human, have a conversation while they're ringing up my broccoli. It's fine. We are human, right? So there's this kind of like, it's complicated, I think, for all of us to let ourselves play. So releasing judgment is just to say, there's no need to criticize your urge to play. Let yourself play. If you want to chat in line, if you want to dance around a little bit, if you want to sing out loud, there is no actual rule against doing that as an adult. And if someone thinks that you're childish or silly because you're doing it, then let them think that. So releasing judgment is really kind of let yourself play. Be aware of the voice that is afraid of the judgment of others and kind of let it go.
I agree with you 100%. Another thing that comes to my mind is playing makes you feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that a lot of adults don't feel enough of. And then we have midlife crisis. We have people so unhappy with their lives, feeling that they feel like robots. Nothing is feeling right in their life anymore.
Yeah.
They don't feel alive anymore. How can we bring more of that feeling alive into our day-to-day?
I would say, let's see, from talking to people about play for the last 25 years and designing for it, right? I'm a designer, so my work has been primarily in creating conditions for free play to arise. And that it's different than kind of game design or video game design. And the reason I don't say that that I design play is that I design for other people to design. So I want to create conditions rather than creating kind of a script, right? Often a game or something with instructions, I think of it as kind of, that's like a play that you consume. So that I think doesn't actually, to your question about feeling alive, I think that people feel most alive when they're part of something, when we create. And when I think we see this with, like, people love to personalize things, or, even if you buy a pair of shoes, but you got to, choose that the sole was green and the laces are red, then we feel like that's mine. Like, I put my touch on it, and which is such a minor shift, but it makes it a product at least meaningful to someone. And so with anything, with creative play in particular, I think that if it taps into us, or if it asks something of us and we are involved in creating it, then that is when we feel alive. And in a lot of play and free play, it's tapping into something that we need. And then from there, we go and find how to do it, right? Rather than having, like I mentioned, also that kind of extrinsic motivator of, like, my watch tells me it's time to stand up. And it's like, so all of these ways that we're kind of getting out of touch with, like, what I actually need. And so if I'm standing up, or because my watch tells me, and I'm walking to the store and back in order to get my steps in, those are kind of extrinsic motivators that then take us out of touch with what I need, right? So this is just to say, with free play, when we're in touch with what we need and we're doing it intrinsically, and we're finding it for ourselves and deciding I'm starting to feel a little bit like grouchy, or I'm starting to kind of like feel a slog, or like, I really, this conversation that I'm going to have, I'm excited about it. And yet like, I feel a little bit like, let's see, or kind of not very excited, physically or conceptually. How should maybe I need to like stand up and jump around. Right before this call, I kind of went outside and raked some leaves, and like just moved my body around. Not because it was productive. I think those leaves are all going to get blown around again, but because I just kind of needed to do something, before I sat back down. So I think these are all ways that being in touch with our own physical and kind of our embodied needs and our creative needs and our connective needs with other people are part of how we feel alive. And those happen a lot in play, and in free play in particular, when we're able to generate rather than consume the play.
Very true. Let's talk about how being able to be more playful and therefore feeling more alive can help people deal with what is happening now when it comes to AI, technology. We already spoke about dealing with uncertainty. Can you elaborate on that? How else play and being playful can help?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of an assumption often that easy is good, or that oh great, if my computer can do this for me, then I don't need to, and that's good, or like that any work that we do is a bummer. And I think we kind of even see this where like there's a movement back to people want to like grow their own herbs. Like yeah, sure, you could go and buy a beautiful perfect bunch of basil, but if you grow it yourself and it might be a little bit ugly and kind of spindly and small, again, like people are so proud of that and really excited about the basil that they grew, right? And so I think that kind of points to the kind of outsourcing everything is maybe not the going to be the best thing, right? And so again, kind of thinking about, wait, what's the goal? Is the goal that that I don't ever compose a sentence on my own? Because I don't think that writing was really making anybody's life that terrible. In fact, writing a sentence and like composing an email to someone is a way that we, can be quite creative. And or just kind of puts us in touch with the people directly, rather than it being something that we've like outsourced to, and of course, like we all know kind of what it feels like to get an email that we can tell wasn't actually generated by the person. And so, which is not to say that all emailing is wonderful. If I had it my way, I think I would be handwriting notes and then, carrying them over to people and handing them to them rather than emailing, which was certainly not efficient. But this is just to say, I think the assumption that the goal is to not do any work is also assuming that the work was terrible, right? And so in my mind, we've outsourced the wrong things. Like we're outsourcing creativity, and creativity was a thing that we really enjoyed doing. Like, I don't know why we're outsourcing art to AI. Art was a thing that we love to do and we need to do. So I really actually feel like it's a mistake to continue doing what we're doing with AI as it relates to creative tasks. And I just would like to remind people that we can still choose to not do that. There's a strange, in the conversations that I'm hearing about AI, and often there's an assumption that it's kind of a train that's left at the station and it's doing what it's going to do and we can't control it. But in fact, we can decide to not do that. And I think we should decide to not do that because it's not helping us feel alive, right? And okay, so now that this thing is being done by someone that's not you, what are you like? That's freeing up your time to do what? And so that's also the thing that like some of those tasks that we do, if we do them playfully, if we can recognize that in fact, like some of that, and I mentioned sweeping leaves, but a lot of the kind of smaller tasks that fill our days feel quite meaningful, because they're what make up, making a house, doing work, communicating with each other, drawing a picture for the sake of pulling something out of yourself, not for the sake of having a beautiful picture. And so again, it's kind of like reframing success to some extent and saying, what is our goal with this, and why are we doing this? Why do I assume that anything that can be outsourced should be? I don't think that it should.
And you're so right that we have a lot of control over situation, because as customers, if we stop buying those applications, then there will be no interest, or there will be a lot less interest
Yeah.
to make those applications available. And another important point there is that, for example, if we take art in terms of creating a picture, a painting, a lot of those things, the apps are able to do it because they've taken pictures by actual people, where they put in their heart and soul into that work. And how fair is that? And the same goes for many other art forms like writing and so on.
Yeah, they kind of again are taking they're disregarding, or they're forgetting that part of why we make art is what we learn about ourselves in the process of making it. Which is also to say that sometimes there'll be a beautiful outcome of that, and most of the time it won't it's not about what it looks like. And I think in order to reconnect with this, if you are somebody who has children in your life, just draw with children the next time that you're around kids who are drawing. And kids, I think 98% of children love drawing, and haven't gotten to a stage in their education where they've been taught what a good drawing looks like. So they all are just like, there's no judgment when they draw. And it feels great to draw with them, because it's not about whether or not it's good. You're all just drawing and figuring out, you're taking something from inside of you and putting it on a page and saying, what would it look like if I did this with the brush? Or what would it look like? How does this pen blend with that pen? And so kind of trying to release judgment, and again, also reframe success, even with being creative, whether it's you're making a craft sort of thing, or you're drawing a picture, or maybe you're even painting a wall in your home that feels like that's a kind of a functional, productive activity, but would feel really good. And maybe it'll be a little bit messier than if you hired a professional, or maybe you do it in a way that's a little more playful and allows for there to be a little bit messier, but you'll have done it, and it feels good to do it, and that can be enough. It doesn't always have to be about the outcome. Not all art needs to live in a gallery or a museum. That's not always the point. So you can make a drawing and then never look at it again, or you can make a drawing and then draw over it.
And there's a lot of art that lives in gallery or museum, and then you compare it to an art created by someone in their home on Sunday. It's not their job, and no one will ever see it. And it is the one you see from the person who's just doing it as a hobby, just touches your heart and inspires you, and the one in the gallery just makes you feel depressed.
Right, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is also the beautiful thing about art, is that it's interpretation, and we may see something, and we can see when there's heart in it, right? And I think we all see it differently. Different pieces will resonate with different people based on kind of what was being brought out of the person who was making it.
Very true.
Yeah.
I want to wrap up with one or two questions, stepping away from our topic for today, my favorite questions to ask.
Okay.
The first one is, over your entire career so far, your entire life so far, were there 2-3 aha moments, realizations that you feel comfortable sharing that really changed the way you look at life or the way you look at business?
Yeah. One happened with my business, actually. When I was in graduate school for design, designed a toy called Gmo that originally was a sculpture and kind of then was fun to play with. And so I re-engineered it slightly, and then it was kind of this toy, and I thought, okay, yeah, I'll have a toy company. And so I founded a business and was selling this toy around the world. It was doing quite well. it was selling a lot, but I wasn't necessarily supporting myself. I think there's a misconception like, oh, if it sells, then I'm made. But, profit margins, and there were batches that had something happened in shipping. So I actually couldn't sell my first batch of inventory. So, as happens in business, there were all kinds of things that I hadn't accounted for. And so I was still had other jobs that were kind of paying for things on the, as I was building the business. And at some point, everything just was continuing to go wrong on the business side, right? I mean, aside from that, it was, people loved it and it was having an incredible reception and lots of attention. But just, packaging errors and things going wrong. And I had an aha moment when I walked past, we have a satirical newspaper in the US called The Onion. It's quite funny. And I was walking past a newspaper stand, and the satirical newspaper, the front of it said, "Failure is now an option," which was a play on the term "failure is not an option," which I think many of us, like the stoicism of like failure, no failure, never accept failure, like don't accept defeat, keep trying, like all of these motivational posters that we all kind of like have somewhere in our minds within capitalism, I think. And it just like unlocked something in me, and I was able to really just kind of let it go. And I said, okay, well, maybe I need to let GMO go. Like I again, in reframing success, I was in it because I loved design and I wanted to create toys that had an interesting play value and engaged imagination. And so it was kind of doing all these things I wanted, but I never necessarily wanted to build a business. And so it kind of reframed what success was. And I thought, well, you know what? I've been flown all over the world. I've like met incredible people. This toy is in thousands of homes all over the globe. Like that is success by many measures. The fact that like I've yet to, reach a profit in my business, in spite of all of the demand, the fact that like, I haven't launched a second product yet, all these things that the business metrics, I was a huge failure. But all of these other things that were happening, I'd learned so much. I knew I had factories in Japan and contacts all over. I'd visited Moscow and Seoul and London and Tokyo, so I was kind of like, wait, this is actually a huge success by these metrics. And maybe I get to think of it as limited edition, instead of assuming that because this thing, there's a demand, I have to keep selling it forever. Because I really was not enjoying the sales part. And that was a huge shift for me. And I let the inventory that I had at the time sell out, and I moved on to other things, which then built into a whole other, all these other new products that I've launched through my company and through others. But until I kind of had that moment of like, why am I assuming that this has to keep going in order to be a success? Like maybe I've already achieved more than I ever hoped to in what I've learned, So that was a big turning point for me. And I think that's present in everything I do. Whenever I'm setting something up or, thinking about a new design that might become a product, I kind of think, okay, well, what role do I want to have in this? Will this let me keep designing new things, or will this become a thing I'm selling for the next 5 years? And if I don't want to be selling it for 5 years, let's kind of move on to the next thing instead.
Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah.
And the last quick question is, if you could instill one belief in every listener's heart, what would it be?
I think it's trust. Trust yourself and trust the people around you who you might play with. Trust that you're safe enough to play. In play, we become quite vulnerable. And I think that's part of why it's scary for adults in particular to let ourselves play is that, we're vulnerable to judgment, to feeling like we're not good at something, or to feeling like a failure, like we're not smart or serious. A lot of adulthood is like contingent on success, and so in play, when you can't win or be good at it, sometimes that's really difficult for people, and requires that we can trust ourselves that, yes, I am still a productive member of society, and also I can be silly, in this meeting, or I can, rearrange my living room in a way that makes no sense at all, but I'm going to try it, or we're going to play test this silly thing, or I'm going to wear a weird shirt, and trust that it's going to be okay. And people will still like you.
Cas, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our discussion today. Where can our listeners learn more about you, buy your book, anything you want to share?
Well, Playful is available anywhere that you buy books, online, or ask your local bookstore. I love kind of playing in bookstores, so I always try to go in and find it on the shelves, or ask for the book that I want in my local bookstore. And rigamajig.com is where most of the products are sold. And Gmo actually came back, so we now do have Gmo. It was limited edition, and then we did one more round, so we have some Gmo for sale there. And then casholman.com and Cas Holman at Instagram, for like events and things like that. We've been posting and answering questions as they come in as well about the book.
Thank you, Cas. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. We had today with us Cas Holman, and you can check out her book, Playful. And we are going to put together key insights and action items from this video, and you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/action. You can also download some gifts from us. So there are two downloads. One is a copy of McKinsey and BCG Benin resume that led to offers from both of those firms. And as you probably know, the format that we use for our clients works really well beyond consulting. We have most of our clients are not even in consulting. It works really well with tech firms, with all kinds of positions in major organizations, including at very senior level. So the first download is McKinsey and BCG resume example. You can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. You can also get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies at firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And you can get a copy of one of our books at firmsconsulting.com/gift. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connect with you all next time.